An anonymous college football coach has gotten it completely wrong about the Georgia Bulldogs. So let's get into it. This is a quote that's from Athlon Sports. I think they do a pretty good job, but this is the quote from the anonymous coach. And I think it's good that they were anonymous because, look, they just got this about Georgia completely wrong. It's a two-parter, and I want to dive into both parts. Here it is. Defensively, they are still an elite group, but they are thin at linebacker. The question mark will be the offense under Gunnar Stockton. They didn't chase any portal guys, so let's see if the kid can become elite. Let's take a pause real quick. If you've been paying attention to Georgia, you know I'm about to tear this apart. First of all, yes, Georgia's defense has a lot of elite talent. There are some question marks. Linebacker, there are no question marks, specifically at the inside linebackers, right? And if they're talking about outside linebackers, I'll give the coach that. I'll give him that. Georgia has some questions at outside linebacker, but I think they addressed it a little bit. Inside linebacker is the deepest position room on this Georgia Bulldogs team. It is arguably the most talented position room and the best group in Georgia. It is one of the best position rooms in all of college football. Between C.J. Allen, Raylan Wilson, Chris Cole, Justin Williams, Krua, I blanked on his first name, Krua, the true freshman, Zayden Walker, the true freshman. Even the reserves are guys that have been around for a long time, like Terrell Foster. They're thin at linebacker? They're thin at linebacker. Georgia has been producing Butkus Award finalists, Butkus Award winners. They're recruiting 4- and 5-star guys at that position. Where is this coming from? Georgia's thin at the linebacker spot. I don't get it. I love it when quotes like this come out because it gives me something fun to debunk and talk about. But look, this is a group that is the least of your concerns if you're a Georgia fan, the least of the staff's concerns if you're a coach. C.J. Allen started last year, started some games in his freshman season. He's going to be a junior this season. He is going to be one of the leaders of this Georgia football team this season. You can tell in press conferences, which, hey, I get to go to. I'm familiar with what's going on around here. And you can tell on the field, this guy is just one of the captains for Georgia in 2025. No doubt about that. Raylan Wilson, more athletic than him, has been around with them. Georgia kind of recruits these inside linebackers in twos almost, right? He and Raylan Wilson, C.J. Allen and Raylan Wilson, the juniors, Chris Cole and Justin Williams, the sophomores, and then you got the freshmen that have come in as well. And they get linked together. And Raylan Wilson and C.J. Allen in the press conference talked about it as their turn this year. This is not a group to be concerned about, and the concerns are edge rushers, outside linebackers, right? Is he talking about that? Well, they went to the transfer portal and got Ella Dozie from Army, their sack leader, their tackles for last year. So it is a question that Georgia is trying to answer. Gabe Harris is no slouch, even though he hasn't had a ton of experience. Chris Jones, Quintavious Johnson, they have talent at that spot. So, yeah. I think Georgia has more question marks on the defensive line than it does in the linebacker room. So that's the first part of this that is just not right. Now let's get to the second part of the quote. And I'll bring it back up. They didn't chase any portal guys, so let's see if the kid can become elite. The question mark will be the offense under Gunnar Stockton. Okay. That's fair. Look, I think it's 100% fair for people to question the ability of Gunnar Stockton. They haven't seen a lot of it. And if you're not really deep into the weeds of this, like people like us are not deep into the weeds of recruiting, you didn't know who Gunnar Stockton was before he went in there for the injured Carson Beck against Texas in the SEC championship game. Right? If you're not really deep into this, you're not a deep Georgia fan, you're not deep into recruiting, or just not deep in the college football world, you probably don't know most teams' backup quarterbacks. I don't know some teams' backup quarterbacks. I know some of them I don't. Obviously, I know about Gunnar Stockton, and I've known about him for a very long time, as I've told y'all over and over again growing up nearby him. It's fair to question Gunnar. it's fair to question an offense that very much struggled in 2024 with Carson Beck and with all those players. A run game that very much struggled, getting under 2,000, rushing for under 1,800 yards. Not good. A pass catcher group that led the country in drops. An offensive line that was injured, and now Georgia has to replace 4 of the 5 primary starters on that line. And it's fair to question Gunner, who most people have only seen about 6 quarters of football out of him, and one of those was in a loss to Notre Dame. 4 of those quarters were losing quarters to Notre Dame. Georgia got portal guys. Okay? On the offensive side of the ball, in terms of weapons to help Gunner Stockton out, they went out and they got the number 2 ranked wide receiver in the transfer portal in Zachariah Branch, former number 1 overall receiver in the 2023 high school recruiting class, one of the more explosive players in the entire country, and a punt return specialist in Zachariah Branch. He gives them some explosiveness that they lacked last season, some shiftiness and speed that they just lacked out of a pass catcher. They went out and they got Noah Thomas, another pretty highly ranked wide receiver out of the transfer portal. I think he was like a top 15 receiver in the transfer portal, a ton of receivers in the transfer portal. The number 1 target for Texas A&M's offense last year. 6'5", 6'6", about 200, 210 pounds. A tall weapon for Gunner to be able to throw it to over the top and throw to in the end zone. They went out and they got Josh McCray, a running back from Illinois, to add to a running back room that certainly has some question marks behind Nate Frazier, behind Cash Jones, right? Doesn't have a lot of experience and has some injury history when you think about Roderick Robinson. Branson Robinson left in the transfer portal. And they needed another power back. They went out and they got that in Josh McCray. Gunner Stockton is going to most likely have this rushing offense performing better than it did last season. Why? He's a threat on the ground with his legs. And part of that is it just would be surprising if Georgia took another step back in that department, wouldn't it? If they rushed for even fewer than about 1,770 yards or whatever final number that they ended up accruing over those 14 games a year ago. I think that the rushing game will be better with Stockton. I think you get year 2 of Nate Frazier, who is it going to be breakout time, right? Josh McCray is an experienced running back who had 10 touchdowns in the Big Ten last year, had over 600 yards, a guy that bounces off of tacklers, a guy that can take it from 30 yards in and score, right? They went out and they added weapons. So this quote is just wrong on all accounts. It's fair to question Georgia. It is completely fair to question whether or not you think Gunner is going to be good. But to talk about they didn't go after portal guys, well, they definitely did. And they definitely went after starters in the portal on offense. Zachariah Branch and Noah Thomas, if the spring is any indication, and if everything we're hearing is any indication, those guys are going to be starters and in the rotation heavily for Georgia's offense. Josh McCray, who is going to be on his last year of eligibility, I believe, the running back from Illinois, I don't think Georgia just brought him in just for another piece. I think they brought him in to get some touches. I expect Josh McCray to be a part of the running back rotation, whether it's in a heavy fashion or whether he's just getting 3 to 5 carries a game. I think he's going to be on the field for Georgia. I think they brought him in for a reason. And if you're Josh McCray, why are you going to Georgia for your last year, for your senior year, if you're not going to play? You know what I mean? And if he's talking about on the defense side of the ball, they went out and they got Ella Mendoza, transfer edge rusher. They went out and they got 3 safeties in the portal, Zion Branch, Zachariah's brother, Jaden Harris, and Adrian Maddox. And they went out and they got Josh Horton, a defensive lineman from Miami. They went out and they got players in the transfer portal. So on all accounts, this anonymous coach just has it completely wrong. And Georgia did do those things. I'm not saying it's not fair to question what Georgia's going to be when you lose Mykel Williams, Jalen Walker, Malachi Starks, all that talent on defense. When Georgia's offense was so disappointing a season ago. Will it be better with a quarterback that's not as highly recruited, that's not supposed to be this Heisman winner, this potential top 5 pick in the NFL draft? Doesn't mean Gunner Stockton's not talented. I do think it is fair to have your questions about it. it's not fair to just say things that, let's just be honest, are completely untrue about it. I'm not here to clock people, but look, you got it wrong, anonymous coach. I think it's good you're anonymous on this quote. Appreciate you watching.